You can avoid this by sidestepping some of the worst mistakes many of us have made when starting out with the Instant Pot. So let's talk about how to give the Splatterfest, the Big Melt and the Stinky rings a miss so you can get on with cooking up healthy and delicious food super quick. And if we've not met before, I'm Susan from Cooking and Calm, and I'm here to help you save time, eat well and find some ease in life no matter what's going on out there. So let's get you off to a good start with that Instant Pot and help you avoid mistake number 1. So if you've not done it before, pressure cooking does have a real learning curve to it. And one of the mistakes many people make when starting out with pressure cooking is forgetting to close the valve. So what the Instant Pot is doing, that as your food's getting hotter and starting to give off steam, it's keeping all of that steam in the pot, and that's what builds the pressure that means that your food can cook super quick. But if this is still open, well, it's a bit like trying to blow up a balloon with a hole in it. All of the steam is going to build up, it's going to start coming out, and you will never get that pressure build. So I know loads of us don't read manuals, but for your Instant Pot, please read your manual. Have it somewhere close when you're starting out to check this kind of thing as you go. And you'll find with some Instant Pots, just seal and pressure will build without you doing anything, like this one. But other models don't self-seal, and you just need to spin across the little valve on the top. But what if it's opening the valve that gets you into trouble? Yeah, this one happened to me and it wasn't pretty. So let's move on to mistake number 2. So what happened to me was that I had an amazing apple harvest from a tree in the garden. And then the day before our holiday, I thought, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just cook all those apples up into applesauce. And so I got them all chopped and peeled and into the pot. So I set the pot away, and then I was rushing around packing. And then guess what I did? I pressed quick release and an applesauce volcano occurred, and that was a very big cleanup job, and you need to avoid it. So let me tell you a bit more about what you need to know to try and avoid an applesauce volcano. So with most Instant Pots, there's 2 kinds of pressure release. Some of the newer ones have got some kind of extra ones, but I'm going to stick with the main ones for today. So the first one is quick pressure release. That's the mistake I made on the applesauce. So quick pressure release is when we release the steam ourselves, the beep goes off, pressure cooker is under pressure, and we release the steam. And this is what people typically think of with pressure cooking, all that kind of steam billowing out the minute that it's cooked. And you do need that sometimes. If you're cooking a delicate dish like some 0-minute broccoli, or you've got some boiled eggs in there, or you're in a rush and you need to get that chicken out of there, then you can use the quick release, the steam comes gushing out, off it goes, and it's all fine. But there is another kind of pressure release that I should have used for the applesauce, and that is called natural pressure release, which is really about being a bit hands-off with your cooking. The Instant Pot will get on with the timed cooking, and when the Instant Pot beeps, it's finished its cooking, it will then just start to slowly release the pressure, and that is natural pressure release. And you can use natural pressure release for lots of foods that don't require immediately taking that lid off. But there are some starchy foods, sticky foods like congee, porridge, lentils, or where the pot's really full, where we shouldn't use quick release. And the other one that, of course, I'm going to enter that is applesauce. It's thick and it was sticky, and well, you saw the result. So for dishes like that, always use a natural pressure release. And a full natural pressure release is when you let the pot entirely release its steam gently and quietly out, and the pin will drop and you'll know it's done a full pressure release. But sometimes it's a matter of kind of doing something in the middle there. That'll give it 10 minutes or 15 minutes to settle down, and then I might use a quick release to release that extra bit of pressure. So as a beginner, I recommend that you use some tried and tested recipes. There's some great creators doing Instant Pot recipes, and I would hold off using some of your favourite recipes and trying to convert them for pressure cooking until you've had a little bit more experience, you know what you're doing, and you know when to use these 2 different releases. Choosing the wrong steam release isn't the only mistake some of us made, and this next one could end your Instant Pot adventures before before they've even begun. But before I go on to that, if you're finding this video useful, it would be really helpful for me if you could give a thumbs up to the video, and that lets YouTube know that I'm trying to be a helpful human. So thank you for that if you can do it. But on to avoiding this complete game over mistake, and that is choosing to put your Instant Pot in a place where it should never be, and that is on the stovetop. So it can be really tempting to place your new Instant Pot onto the hob or the stovetop. You've got your extractor fan probably above it there, so it feels like it makes sense. But I can tell you that over all the years I've been cooking with Instant Pots, I've heard so many stories of people putting their Instant Pot on the hob, best intentions, seems to make sense, but then either they or someone else in the family comes in, turns on the wrong cooking ring on the hob and melts the Instant Pot, and there is no coming back from a melted Instant Pot. So find somewhere in the kitchen which is maybe close to the stove so the extractor fan can still take some of that steam from quick release, or maybe near a window, or just somewhere where it will fit. Most of us have kitchen worktops deep enough that we can pull out the Instant Pot from under the kitchen cabinet and then push it back afterwards so it's out of the way. And I have heard of people doing all kinds of things to kind of fit their Instant Pot on the stove that they're no longer using, but my advice is, I've heard about many of these melted Instant Pots that can't be fixed and they're not covered by the warranty. So place your Instant Pot on the worktop and not the hob. And speaking of breaking your Instant Pot, there is another game over mistake that you can avoid. And mistake number 4 is forgetting to replace your inner pot when it's being washed up and ending up putting the ingredients or pouring a whole jug of stock into the unit itself. And if any liquid gets poured into here, it will get into the electrics and the mechanism, and that is game over for the Instant Pot. So always, always, always before you start cooking, check that you've got your inner pot in the Instant Pot. But then even when your inner pot is in place, you might find the Instant Pot giving you an angry beep if you don't follow this next tip. And mistake number 5 is disregarding all the things we know about what makes the Instant Pot give us an angry burn notice. And although this is kind of a mistake, it's also really part of being an Instant Pot user, and there are very few people that don't get a burn notice, even when you've been cooking with the Instant Pot as long as I have, and cooks more experienced than me. Sometimes the Instant Pot will beep and it will say on the display something like burn, and it's a little bit alarming, but what it's actually doing is just telling you that your food's about to burn. So if you imagine you were on the stovetop, you hadn't stirred something for a while and it dried out, and next minute it's congealing on the bottom and starting to burn. That's really all that's happening in the Instant Pot when you get that burn notice. So no need to be alarmed. In fact, we could be a bit grateful the Instant Pot is trying to help us and saying it's too hot in here, or it's too dry and sticky in here and I need some help. And I did hear you, a lot of you contacted me saying you'd like a deep dive into the burn notice, so I am going to make that video and that will come up soon. But in the meantime, remember these 3 ways to keep the burn notice down to a minimum at least. Make sure you deglaze before you move to pressure cooking. Ensure there's enough water in your recipe so it's not going to dry out too much. And then if you're using things like tinned tomatoes, tomato puree, pop them on top of your food and then stir them in at the end of pressure cooking. And that way you will avoid at least some of the burn notices, and the rest of it, you'll cope with it. It's fine, not a big deal, nothing's happening, loads of safety features on the Instant Pot. You can do this. But even doing the best you can to avoid the burn notice doesn't mean that you're completely out of the woods, because this next one is a bit of a sneaky one that not many people know about. So let's talk about the condensation collector. So on your Instant Pot somewhere you will find a little plastic tub, and this is the condensation collector, and it fits on the back. Some of them are really easy to fit and some of them are more fiddly, but there it is. And what that does is that as you're cooking and the Instant Pot gets water kind of around here, the water will come around and it will drain off into that condensation collector. And if you forget about this, eventually it will either overflow and have that sticky starchy water all running down the Instant Pot, and that's a cleaning job you don't need, or even worse, it will go kind of rancid as it starts to evaporate. You'll end up with a load of flies around it. Disgusting. So get into the habit of, whenever you finish cooking with your Instant Pot, take out the condensation collector, rinse it out and just pop it back on again. But even when your condensation collector is tip top and squeaky clean, there's one mistake that people make that can mean you end up with a really stinky Instant Pot, and that is storing it with the lid on. So closing and locking the lid to store your Instant Pot when there's probably still a little bit of dampness around that seal or around the lid area or in the inner pot, it's a bit like leaving a very damp dishcloth out, and it ends up being disgusting. So although it looks pretty, it's not going to smell pretty, and it will not be hygienic for cooking. So to avoid a stinky, unhygienic Instant Pot, always give it a clean after every use. Store your Instant Pot, you open the lid and leave it here in the flipped position so that it's in the air, can keep dry, and it's beautifully hygienic and ready for your next cook. But now you know what to avoid, you need to learn how the Instant Pot can help make your day a little bit more relaxing when it all goes pear-shaped. So have a look at my deep dive on the keep warm function in the Instant Pot. It's in this video here, and I'll see you over there.